President is trying to join. He's trying to log in.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's trying to log in. Maybe, Mr. Moderator, you could start the introduction of the panelists.
Okay.
While the logs in, we don't question.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Alimi. So I'll just give some sort of background before I go into the introductions. Today we will be discussing something that is actually something you call a hot topic currently. In many jurisdictions, we have directors of companies who are subject to statutory and fiduciary duties. And these duties require them to carefully consider the impact and the short-term and long-term impact of their action on the company's stakeholders. So directors need to be aware of these shareholder interests when deciding how best to direct the actions of their company, and will need to balance carefully the short-term needs of the company against the long-term impact of their decisions. You all agree with me that these are uncertain times, and particularly so for businesses. We are all aware that as part of efforts to stem the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, several governments and government agencies have released laws and guidelines, which in certain instances have had some impact on shareholder rights. So today we'll be discussing these rights and how these rights may have been affected. The general objectives of the webinar will be to examine the place of shareholder interests in a crisis such as the one we are facing, the role of the board in ensuring adequate and effective shareholder engagement within the confines of regulatory policies. To discuss these issues with me, we have a rich and distinguished panel of discussants. However, before I introduce our guests, let me just quickly take you through a few ground rules for this discourse. You will notice we've muted every participant at this webinar aside the speakers. This is to ensure that we do not have noise interference and to ensure orderliness. After the panelists will be done with the discussion segment, which should take approximately about an hour, you'll be able to participate. Please note to use the Q&A box of the Zoom application rather than the chat box. This is to ensure that we can keep track of your questions and and it's not lost in the chat room. You will be able to participate and we'll be able to hear you also after the panelists are done with the discussion segment. We'll also encourage you, if you've not done so, to use your real names if you want to ask any questions so that we can identify you. If the device you are using is not already in your name, remember to mention which of the panelists your question is being directed to. So, having said all that, I will just go straight to introduce our panelists. My first panelist brings over 29 years experience in litigation and corporate practice. He has experience both in legal and corporate practices. While he was in practice, he was a partner in law. When during his discussion, he makes references to precedents and decided cases. He is also the company secretary and legal advisor for EMTS 9 Mobile. He was former director, legal services, Coca-Cola Bottling Company. He's a member of the IUD and Society for Corporate Governance, in addition to being a member of the International Bar Association and the NBA. He also serves as a facilitator at the Institute of Directors on Law and Corporate Governance. He's a law graduate of the University of Lagos, a member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, and an alumnus of the Lagos Business School. Welcome, Mr. Oreoluwa Olajide, Company Secretary, Mobile Nigeria. Mr. Olajide, do you want to say a word or two? Okay.
I just say thank you, Mr. Moderator, and all the panelists and our participants.
Okay, thank you very much. Nice to have you here. The next panelist, my next panelist is the Chief Communications and Public Affairs Officer of General Electric Africa. Prior to joining the team at General Electric Africa in 2012, she spearheaded a number of roles at Procter & Gamble. She served as a corporate communications and brand PR manager before being promoted as the external relations group manager for West Africa, with a special focus on corporate communications in sub-Saharan Africa. Outside of her work, she's passionate about giving back to her community and watching others flourish as a result. This explains why she's on the board of directors for the Water Trust, as well as the Lagos State Industry Advisory Board for the Yaba ICT Cluster Project. Additionally, she supports up-and-coming professionals by serving as a jury member for the African Communications Excellence Awards. Alongside these endeavors, she is a member of the Forbes Communications Council and a team teacher at a local church. Welcome, Ms. Patricia Obozua, Chief Communications and Public Affairs Officer, General Electric Africa.
Thank you, Ayokole. I'm delighted to be here in this great panel.
Thank you. Nice to have you here too. The next panelist I'm going to be introducing is the founder and is the first national coordinator of the Independent Shareholders Association of Nigeria, ISAN. He started his working career with the famous Daily Times of Nigeria, where he worked variously in the accounts and marketing departments before undertaking large-scale investments in the capital market. He's a very experienced director, having served on the boards of many blue-chip companies. He's a member of several boards, including R3 Bisco PLC, Sunaco Nigeria Limited, Ubuchi Limited, Kajola Integrated Investment PLC, MRS Oil Nigeria PLC, amongst others. He has also served as a member of the Federal Government of Nigeria Commission on Vision 2020. His passion, dedication, and courage to educate himself, especially in the areas of accounts, finance, and general professional disciplines, within and outside the capital market, have earned him so much respect that practitioners now fondly call him professor. He has attended several courses and seminars, both locally and internationally, and he's also the recipient of several awards. Welcome, Sir Sonny Nnamdi-Wosu, KSSGCOA, National Coordinator, Independent Shareholders Association. Welcome to this webinar. Sir Wosu, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, sir. Thank you. Nice to have you here. Finally,
hello.
We have.
Hello.
Yes. Hello,
Mr. President. You're welcome.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Ayoko. No. The president is there. I think after the introduction, you will be able to take your opening remarks. Sir.
Okay, that's fine. Welcome, Mr. President.
Thank
so
you.
Finally, we have representing the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Mr. Onyema, who is unavoidably absent here, but she is ably represented by the Executive Director of Regulations at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Prior to attaining the position of Executive Director at the exchange, she was the General Counsel and Head of the Legal and Regulations Division, where she oversaw the activities of 5 departments. She also served as Secretary to the Council of the Exchange from January 2011 to October 2015, where she played a key role in building the governance structure of the exchange. She's a board member of the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, and she was also the chairman of the Public Governance Committee of the Financial Reporting Council Board that developed the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance. She has a wealth of experience and solid track record across organizations on 3 continents, including the United Nations International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague, the Netherlands, and the United Nations Compensation Commission in Geneva, Switzerland. She has also worked in top-tier law firms in Nigeria and New York. She has over 24 years of professional experience and holds an LLB degree from the Obafemi Awolowo University, where she graduated as the best student in the Faculty of Law. She also finished the law school with the first class honors, graduating as the best overall student. She holds LLM degrees from the Harvard Law School, where she was a London Gammon Fellow, as well as the London School of Economics and Political Science, where she graduated with merit. At the London School of Economics, she was a British Council Scholar. She is admitted to both the Nigerian and New York bars. Welcome, Ms. Tinua Diawe, Executive Director, Regulations Divisions, Nigerian Stock Exchange.
Thank you very much, Ayokunle. I'm very glad to be here, and I bring good tidings from Oscar.
Thank you very much. Nice to have you here, and thanks for being part of this. So at this point, I'm going to take a pause, and I'm going to allow the president to say a word or two to kickstart off this webinar.
Yeah, my erudite company secretary.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
I'm fine, sir.
Yes. Just like I told you yesterday, that I'll be joining after my board meeting. I'm already at a board meeting, but I've stationed my PA to Moses Ibrude, which you know very well, that you should start taking down questions.
Yes, sir.
And as soon as I finish at the board meeting, I will honestly give you enough time to answer those questions.
Okay. That's fine, sir.
Yeah, but
That's
continue.
Fine.
And
Okay,
as to when, I will also utilize the time of our break to attend to join you.
Okay.
So we have to take a short break. I will join you. Yeah. I'm sorry about that. It's just because of the postponement of this program.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay. Yes. We have taken note of that. So, Mr. President, sir, can you?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Oh, great. Ladies and gentlemen, first let me make an apology that I didn't get the right connection immediately, but I've finally been able to sort that out. So I do apologize for keeping you late and for starting this program rather a little later than arranged. Our distinguished panelists and their moderator, I thank you very much. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Governing Council, the Institute of Directors Nigeria, I welcome you all to this edition of our webinar series with the theme Organizational Statutory Obligations and Shareholders' Interest in the COVID-19 era. I noticed that you have already introduced your panelists, but I do need to recognize them as well. The Oscar Oyema, FIOD, who is being represented today by Ms. Tinuati, who's an Executive Director of Regulations at the Stock Exchange. Ms. Patricia Obozua,
Olajide,
MIOD, a Company Secretary and Head Legal Legal Department, Munai Mobile Nigeria. Of course, Nwosu, Sonny Nwosu, MIOD, the National Coordinator of Independent Shareholders Association. I'd like to welcome particularly our moderator, Mr. Yokule Ayoko, the Company Legal Advisor of Budget Pay LLC. I note with satisfaction that this team of experts assembled here today will share with us their decades of experience in corporate governance, commercial law, business administration, and management, amongst others. Our panelists are highly skilled corporate governance executives and versatile business leaders with several years of active experience working in various sectors of the economy. I'm indeed very proud and happy to welcome all of you, share your experiences, and contribute meaningfully to this discourse. I also wish to welcome all other eminent personalities, our guests, associates, and friends of our great institute at this event. So you probably are all calling from different parts of the world. You're most welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this event has been carefully chosen to echo and address some of the challenges posed by COVID-19, which the entire world is battling with at the moment. At the corporate level, the pandemic presents complex and interconnected challenges for businesses, part of which includes the need to meet regulatory obligations while taking into consideration the interests of shareholders. As you may be aware, in many jurisdictions, directors of the company are subject to statutory or fiduciary issues, which require them to consider carefully the long-term impact of their actions on the company's stakeholders, such as shareholders. Directors need to be aware of these shareholder interests when deciding how best to direct the activities of their company, and the need to balance carefully the short-term needs of the company against the. In Nigeria, the Corporate Affairs Commission, CAC, has issued new guidelines permitting public companies to host their AGM by allowing their shareholders to attend the meeting through pre-selected proxies that satisfy the company's quorum conditions. Shareholders are not allowed to attend in person under the guidelines in the bid to comply with state regulations on social distancing. Incidentally, the Nigerian law requires the quorum of a general meeting to be present in person at a place in Nigeria designated by the meeting notice to be the venue for the meeting. While it is possible for the members to join the meeting online, they would not be considered as being present at the meeting and would only be able to vote by proxy through a member physically present at the meeting, as the law does not currently envisage completely virtual general. It will help directors wade through the challenging time by examining the place of shareholders' interest and the role of the board in order to ensure that adequate and effective shareholder engagement are conducted within the confines of regulatory policy. Distinguished directors and leaders, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to accordingly encourage all of us to be open-minded and participate actively in this webinar. Wealth of experience of our panelists and indeed our moderators. I thank you. I thank the management and the staff of the Institute for organizing this official webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I thank you for coming to this webinar, attending this webinar, and I wish you a fruitful deliberation. Thank you. Did you hear me?
Thank you, sir.
Hello?
Thank you. Yes, we can hear you, sir. We hear you loud and clear. Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much once again. Thank you. I'm sorry, like I said, for keeping you waiting, but there we are.
Okay, that's fine, Mr. President. Thank you so much for setting the tone and for your address. It's very much appreciated, and that set the tone for the webinar. So without wasting time, we'll just go straight to the issues to be considered. My first question then goes to, like I said before I asked the first question, our participants can have an opportunity for our participants to ask questions at the end of this discussion. Questions, and please use the Q&A box of the application. So my first question will go to Mr. Olajide. With the COVID pandemic foreclosing the convening of annual general meetings in the manner and form we are used to, and with a lot of companies adopting either the AGM by proxy, set in the guidelines of the Corporate Affairs Commission, some have adopted the virtual model, some have adopted the hybrid model. Which would you consider advisable for companies to adopt? Will you say shareholders are happy with this development? Or what will you say is the mood of the Nigerian shareholders to this development? Mr. Lajide.
Okay, thank you, Ayo. And once again, greetings to our co-panelists, IOD, for giving us this opportunity to rub minds together. And greetings also to our participants. Yes, the tone has been set, and we need to examine in details the theme, organizational, statutory obligations, and shareholder interest in the COVID-19 era. I'll be looking at this from different perspectives. One, we need to understand that this is part of ethics and compliance. This is part of corporate governance. It's also part of risk management, and it has also to do with business sustainability. So also we need to understand as a background that the laws, the extant laws have not changed. They remain the same. The regulatory framework have not changed. They remain the same. So it properly sits the topic we are discussing under statutory obligations of the directors. If we look at the Companies and Allied Matters Act, from section 63, subsection 3, section 29, sub 3, section 279, sub 4, and section 283. These sections of the law sits the director in a statutory position to manage the company in such a way as to preserve assets and value. If I may quote section 63(3), except as otherwise provided in the company's articles, the business of the company shall be managed by the board of directors of the company, who may exercise all such powers of the company as are not by this act or the articles required to be exercised by members in general meeting. So having found ourselves where we are, how are the directors of the company to exercise their powers, especially withholding of AGMs? We have the rules and regulations and the various laws from the federal and the state government with regards to COVID-19 safety and security. So, framework provided by regulatory authorities, the CAC, the Securities and Exchange Commissions, and Nigeria Stock Exchange, giving appropriate collaboration and support to the companies and all other stakeholders to be able to function properly. Hence, the boards are left. Hence, the boards are left.
The company
this time and system of AGM, either hybrid, either the online, either the total virtual meetings, is left for each board to adopt. These systems are not cast in stone. The boards have the rights and they have the obligation, taking advantage of the guidelines that have been provided by the regulatory authorities, to sit the AGM in proper perspectives. Also, I need to mention that some school of thoughts have said that it is not compulsory that these AGMs are held right now. You still have time within which you can hold your AGM. And if you are about running out of time, you can apply for extension. You are granted the 3-month extension, and if you can't do it within the 3 months, either you ask for another extension or you have to go to the court, as the case may be. So as it is, we have just found ourselves in an unfamiliar territory, and everybody must collaborate and put heads together to make sure that the business continues. As regards the issue of shareholders' interest, I want to let us know also that part of what the board is doing, the regulatory agencies are doing, is to protect the shareholders. Don't forget that the age bracket of most of these shareholders fall within the vulnerable and risk group. And so, if the government, through legislation or regulation, says, for your safety, for social distancing, for not being able to gather together, let this be done. I want to believe it's in the interest of the shareholders. I want to believe the shareholders should cooperate with the board to steer the ship of the organization to success. And let me round up by saying that I want to recommend to the shareholders to look again at the statement being credited to Jack Ma, to the effect that for every one of us and business owners, staying alive should be considered a profit during this COVID-19 period. And that should be paramount to all. And then if we are alive, we'll be able to do another AGM come 2021. Thank you. That will be for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Mr. Olajide. Thank you for shedding light. I'm still going to throw a rider to you on that. Basically, lots of there has been an argument from some quarters to say that basically in response to what you said about the possibility of companies being the AGM, there has been an argument that shareholders need their dividends, especially in these trying times when they need some sort of palliative. How do you respond to this?
Well, thank you, moderator, once again. You know, nobody is denying the shareholders of their dividends. But you also need, we also need to know that part of the statutory obligations of the directors, they have that power, which nobody can query or question, to declare dividends. If the board has not declared a dividend, that is their prerogative, statutory obligation. But so far, I've not seen organizations not declaring dividend. They have declared dividend, and it's the right of the shareholders to approve this dividend at the AGM. All the AGMs that have been conducted so far, online, hybrid, virtual, so far so good. I've also seen adverts in the papers for other multinationals. I've seen the one for Julius Baja, I've seen the one for Stanbic, I've seen the one for Nestle. All of them have recommended dividends. They have declared dividends to be approved by the shareholders at the AGM. So they are entitled to dividend, is their right, but at the same time, I go back to my initial point. This is the time to adopt soft skill of creativity, innovation, teamwork, and support to the management and the board for sustainability purposes. Don't let us have a short-term view about what is happening. We should have a long-term view. If it is necessary to plow back capital into the business for sustainability so that shareholders will earn dividend for a long time, so be it. I don't think shareholders will want to take dividends now, and then going forward from next year, they will not be able to obtain dividend. And let me also add, Mr. Moderator, just one second to add this. We have seen the first quarter result of companies. It's a little bit good. Let's wait for the second quarter. Don't forget, towards the end of March, April, till now, that was when the lockdown started. For major cities, such as Abuja and Lagos, economic nerve center of the country, I don't think the second quarter results will be too good. That's my opinion. So, shareholders need to support the board and the management for sustainability purposes, despite the fact that they are entitled to their dividends. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Olajide. Very, very interesting perspective, and thank you so much for taking us through that. I think Sasson wants a thing or two to respond to that. I see he's raising his hand. Sanwosu, sir, are you there?
Well, Mr. Olajide has done a good job on behalf of shareholders. It is very clear that we're at war that does not require ballistics or anything. But luckily for us, this war will soon end with the discovery of Italian authorities that what is actually killing people is blood clots and all this and that in the pandemic. And they have discovered again that aspirin and Panadol will solve most of the problems. And therefore, thousands of the patients admitted had already left the hospital. And that gives me a clear hope that with very short time, we will get to the end of this pandemic. The most important thing is that it is a temporary time. And for temporary occasion, you have to apply certain methodologies that will help to overcome the problems. When you talk about Nigerian shareholders all over the world, we want to see a return from our investment. And that was why at the first interactive discourse that we had on IoT, I said the dividend is the palliative for shareholders. And so it be, we must have it. Now, I sent out a memo much earlier when we discovered this. And we said that for the powers inherent in directors, that they can declare 10 interim dividends so that we can hold on to the AGM pending when the cost will be clear. And that what matters mostly for us is to have money to eat. Even if we do not have money to further invest during this period, we must have money from the investment we have done to eat. And of course, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, I'm happy to know is there, turned it down that it's not within their purview to discuss this and that is CAC. So CAC then came with their own methodology, which so many shareholders have come to us to say is suable, and that if such happens, they will claim billions of naira. I said that is not the issue. The issue is regulators must come together and find a way to ensure that the minority shareholders do not suffer unnecessarily. And that's why we are agreeing to CAC and other regulators' arrangement on this, which of course means that collecting proceeds means that you are representing the minority shareholders at such occasion. And whatever is done, the leaders who are being asked to be proxies do not, I repeat, do not tell you how to vote. Vote according to your conscience. Because by the time you are voting according to your conscience, it represents your feelings about the whole occasion. And the registrars will capture this as the pattern of vote that has taken place for that occasion. And it will also be released according to the voting pattern. So that automatically represents the view of an ordinary shareholder outside there. At the end of the day, we approve a dividend and you have your money. You can see what has happened to all the palliative government is putting here and there, that it cannot reach everybody. It's going to those who have their godfathers and all this and that. But your investment, you get a return, you can do anything with it. My opinion is that the directors must take a right decision to ensure that whatever decision they've taken will be approved by majority of the shareholders. No one person created by God can claim to be perfect in everything, but make sure that whatever decision you have taken will meet the desire of majority of the shareholders. That is just very clear. Now, seeing it from another angle, that today, World Bank is saying that the bank should not pay dividend. You can imagine that. And you can imagine how it's going to actually rubbish investment. If I have an investment in the company, World Bank did not give me money to buy my shares. And World Bank is dictating that they should not pay dividend, they should plow back. I agree with Oren on what he has said. All the dividend paid is coming from last year returns, which showed profit. If there's no profit in a company, the company will not declare any dividend, except if the reserve is very robust. If the reserve is robust, that money is also meant for shareholders. They take in consideration to release part of the reserve to pay shareholders to appreciate them for their patience and investment in that company. So for anybody to say, if we want to move forward in this country, it will not be dictated to by an advanced country that in fact they are not used to paying dividend at all. So I am happy for this program. So many people will understand that IOD stands for the benefit of everybody who is an investor. I don't want to talk too much because Ore has already spoken at length on some of the good things about directors, judicial responsibility of directors, which is very important. For instance, what makes me a member of IOD is because I'm also a director somewhere, and we must take a just decision that will benefit everybody. Nobody talks about himself or herself on the board. We take decisions that will be applicable or benefit to everybody. In order not to take too much time on this, I will stop so far. Maybe there'll be questions and other things that I have to answer. But the issue remains that this is the best alternative to the situation at hand, which is being applied by the regulators. It's been embraced by shareholders, even though some of them may not like it, because the platform of AGM allows them to interact with directors. But like I said, this is very temporary, and with time it will go away. But I will appeal to the regulators that they should not allow this regulation we apply now to stay more than the period of the COVID-19, so that everything will return back to normal. So that's my appeal to the regulatory authorities on this. Thank you very much, moderator.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. That was quite interesting, and that was a quite interesting expose. So I'm going to go straight to the next question. And my next question goes to Ms. Awe. From a regulatory perspective, can you talk to us about the expected role of regulators and shareholders in facilitating this emerging change to the benefit of all stakeholders? Ms. Awe?
Thank you very much for that question. I think, like everyone else, the regulators see this as a fluid situation. And any time that you are faced with something that has never been faced in your lifetime, I think the last time that there was a pandemic at this proportion was about 100 years ago. Everyone has to come together, and the regulators are no different. I think what is expected of regulators now is to look at their own sectors and see what are the things that the regulated entities in my sector are supposed to do, what is expected of them, either by myself or other stakeholders in that sector, in this case, specifically stakeholders like shareholders, and how can I assist them to ensure that they will not be terribly harmed during this situation. So giving an example of what we did at the exchange, we have two primary stakeholder groups that we regulate, the listed companies and the dealing members. We went to the drawing board and we said, what are the obligations of listed companies and dealing members at this time? One obvious obligation is that they have to prepare financial statements because it was the end of the year. They had to have general meetings. They had to disclose what was, how the issues are affecting the company, and how the company is doing with respect to this situation. And so with that in mind, we started looking at what can we do to help them. And that's why we came up with a number of issues. Our very first or second circular on the issue were around, we're going to give you an extension of time with respect to meeting your obligations to file your financial statements, because we know that you are affected. Then we started looking even closely, taking financial statements specifically. What is in the financial statements? Part of things in the financial statements are things like the fact that certain people have to sign them, certain people have to stamp them. The assurance folks have to stamp and put seals. Are those assurance folks even in their offices surplus of being able to do that with these financial statements? So we started engaging in the community, engaging with the FRC, engaging with ICANN, engaging with the CAC, and that's exactly, we think, what regulators need to do at this time. Who are the entities and regulators that affect the entities that you regulate? You then engage with them in order to find a way to make things go smoothly for your regulated entities. Now, I say smoothly. It is not that these obligations, so COVID-19 has not removed any obligation from a regulated entity. What the regulator needs to do is, despite the fact of COVID-19, despite the fact that the obligation still exists, how can we assist you to ensure that you meet that obligation? And I think that regulators in Nigeria have done a pretty decent job of trying to do that. So the CAC regulations, for example, the CAC guidelines, and I use the word guidelines advisedly, they're not regulations, were something that the CAC developed after one of such engagements with a group of regulators and entities that were involved in that are affected by this process, including the Nigerian Stock Exchange. So those are the kinds of things that regulators are doing, and we're not doing them only in Nigeria. If you look elsewhere, in fact, on the issue, since we've talked about the very delicate issue of dividends, I will tell you, for example, that in England, the Bank of England and the Prudential Regulatory Authority wrote to the systemic banks, wrote to insurers and said, look, at this point, we're not expecting that you pay dividends. At this point, we're not expecting that senior management and other people that are in authority will be getting bonuses, because we need you as entities in the financial system to be well capitalized. We know that that we did a lot of work after the last global meltdown, but because we don't know how long this issue is going to be with us, we need to ensure that you are conserving capital. And so those are the kinds of things that regulators need to do to be proactive. And I think we've done that. Now, with respect to shareholders, we think shareholders own the company. Unfortunately, the phrase shareholder activism has gotten a bad name. There's no reason why it should have a bad name. In fact, if shareholders are not active at a time like this, one should be wondering what they're doing. And indeed, I'm quite pleased to note that shareholders have been very vocal about what they like and what they don't like at this time, and we're bearing it in mind. For example, with the virtual meetings, we know that some of the shareholders have said we expect all the regulators to be in attendance at those not virtual meetings, the proxy meetings. I'm sorry, they're proxy meetings. They're saying we expect all the regulators to be in attendance at these proxy meetings to ensure that nothing underhand is happening. So we expect shareholders to put the foot of management and the directors to the test, to ask them questions like, how is this affecting our company? How is this affecting your forecasts? How is this affecting the profit? Are you going to lay off people? How is it affecting your ecosystem? Primark and a number of companies in the UK have cancelled like 2.8 million pounds of orders. Bangladeshi companies that are supplying them, that are garment factories that are supplying them, are affected by that. So shareholders should be asking questions like that. We know you sit in Lagos, we know you sit in Abuja, but are you affected? Are there components of what you are producing that are produced in China? How are they affected by what is happening? Those are the kinds of questions that shareholders should be asking. And those are the types of issues that directors really need to think, what are we disclosing? How are we disclosing? And how are we engaging to ensure that we're carrying our shareholders along? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's actually very a good exposition for that. However, so I see a question in the Q&A box, which is closely close to what you've just explained. So I'll just quickly take that as an exception, because we've said that it will be after it. So we have a question from Mr. Adewale Olawe. He says that what authority does CAC have to issue guidelines in the first place to deprive or disenfranchise shareholders of their private rights? They are statutorily protected under CAMA. I'm aware you are not, you don't agree for the CAC, but I don't know if you can attempt to address this.
Yes, I can attempt to address the question. I think, first of all, we need to be very clear that the guidelines are exactly that, they're guidelines. And companies have the obligation to do their own analysis and risk assessment as to whether to take advantage of the safe harbor that the CAC has put in those guidelines, bearing in mind that it is a safe harbor by the CAC and not by anybody else. So companies do not have to hold their AGMs now. The guidelines are simply saying, this is what the CAC has assessed around this situation. We think you can have proxy meetings, and we've set out the conditions under which we will put our own mark of imprimatur on you having such proxy meetings. It is up to the companies to decide whether they prefer to wait for the CAMA provisions. Now, you know, under CAMA, you can have your AGM 15 months after your last AGM. And if you don't want to have it, then you have 3 months. You can approach the CAC for 3 months. So you can have it 18 months later. So it's all well and good. A company can decide, I'm going to wait out that 18 months. I'm going to see whether they will have a vaccine. I'm going to see whether they will have the drugs and social distancing and all of those challenges that I have. But I think as directors, and since we have a number of directors on the call, I think it's important that you weigh all the options. So what types of shareholders do you have? Are your shareholders going to be dying of hunger by the time that you want to have your AGM in 18 months' time? If it's a company where the shareholders are used to getting dividends and they've made this a part of their summer income. There are quite a number of septuagenarians and octogenarians who rely on dividends to supplement their pension income. I think you should also be asking, is it a risk? Do I have the possibility that certain shareholders may feel that they were disenfranchised and therefore will bring action in court? Now, CAMA doesn't leave you helpless, because under Section 223 of CAMA as well, you can approach the court. There are approaches that can be made to court to have your AGM in a way that you will apply to the court, saying this is the way you want to have it. So I think if people look at some of the sections of CAMA, and I think there's no better time now that the judiciary itself is considering virtual hearings for people to be going to court to say, well, we want to do a hybrid, or we want to do something by proxy, or we want to do something virtual. It's a very fluid situation. And so we're all looking at this issue fluidly. No one's ever faced this issue, I think, in living memory. And so it's very important that we bear that in mind. And so I think it's completely legal for a company to say, I'm not going to use these guidelines, because in the assessment of the directing minds of that company, it is not an appropriate tack to take for that company.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I think you've addressed that comprehensively. I'll just, so my next question will go to Ms. Obazua. My question will be as regards communication at this point. Mr. Awe mentioned that at this point, shareholders should be asking questions from the company as should be concerned about the operational and dynamics of the company and all of that. However, my question then becomes this. In view of what is going on, in view of the pandemic, how do you, as a board, how do you manage shareholder expectations, and how do you bridge the communication gap with your stakeholders to ensure that you are all on the same page during these difficult times? Mr. Bosua.
Thanks, Ayakune, and thank you to the Institute of Directors, the panelists, and the guests for this opportunity to talk about this topic. I think where COVID-19 is concerned, this pandemic hit us when we weren't expecting it. We knew that there were things happening in China, but it came onto everyone as a surprise, both shareholders and companies. Well, I say shareholders and companies, even though shareholders own the company. But I mean, management of companies, shareholders, everyone alike got this by surprise. Even when we knew what was going on, we weren't prepared for the different angles that this pandemic, resulting lockdowns will take, the kind of toll it will take on economies. Countries are facing issues. Nigeria specifically, we've had to revise our growth projections. I think it was from 2.5% to 2%. Even then, we were only just recovering from previous recession that came on from the oil industry, low oil prices. So it's an unprecedented time. But companies are suffering from this thing in very different ways. Some companies are gaining and some are winning. Generally speaking, the lockdowns have been the biggest part of the nightmare for companies. You will find tech companies, I mean, globally, you would see companies that are based on tech, like Amazon or Facebook or Zoom that we're using, declaring they got much higher revenues than expected. And then on the other hand, the other extreme is hospitality industry, airlines have been hit terribly. We're hearing outrageous figures like Lufthansa is losing 1 million euros per hour. The parent company of British Airways has lost $1.8 billion in the past quarter. So it hits companies in different ways. But that's why communication is extremely important. And the main thing, and I'll keep saying this probably as an answer to most questions I'm asked about communications, is at times like this, the most important thing is to stay extremely close to the business. You need to understand what's going on with this business. How is it affecting us? How are supply chains being affected? How are employees being affected? Are we allowed to operate? Do the lockdown exemptions apply to us? What can we do differently to take advantage of the situation? I mean, not obviously in a more noble kind of way, but it's going to hit people in very different ways. You're seeing things like the fashion industry, people who were producing clothes are making face masks. People who were making cosmetics are making sanitizers. So it's hitting companies in very different ways, and communication can only be as good as the knowledge that the communicators have. So it's continually assessing the situation. The second thing I would say is a company needs to be very transparent at times like this. When companies keep quiet in times of crisis, they leave it open to others to interpret what their actions are, or what they're planning, or what's truly going on. So being transparent is critical at times of crisis, whether it's COVID or any other kind of crisis. But the trick is we shouldn't be hasty to communicate. Things are rapidly evolving. People talk of the new normal, but the truth is we're in transition. Nobody knows what's going to happen next week. So communications also need to be a bit cautious. Don't be hasty, understand the situation, and then be transparent. And the third main point is embrace technology. I don't know how many of you have attended or spoken at this many webinars in the past 5 years, should I say, or whenever they were invented. I mean, Zoom is getting much more revenues than they ever imagined that they'll get. So embrace technology. It's going to be the difference between being quiet and being heard. And shareholders are so critical that you can't afford to just stay in the background and not speak. Transparency, using technology, and ultimately continually assessing the situation so you know what's going on and what to communicate.
Thank you so much. That's quite insightful. And I think whilst I'm not speaking for SEC, I'm aware that from a regulatory perspective, SEC was proactive in prompting companies to release some sort of communication to share to members and shareholders just recently. So my next question is still going to go back to, we're going to full circle back to Mr. Olajide. Mr. Bajwa mentioned that a lot of people are starting to speak about the new normal. A lot of people are beginning to see what we are going through now as the new normal. Now, my question to him then becomes this: are we going to, are boards now be looking to make what we have experienced this year the new normal? Are we to take it that what we're experiencing and the way we are running general meetings are to be taken as the new normal, or what are we to expect going forward? I'm aware that a lot of companies are looking to amend their amendments to ensure that virtual meetings are provided for such to ensure that there's a legal framework. So are we to look at this as an exceptional year, or is this what to expect going forward? Mr. Olajide.
Thank you very much, Ayo. Once again, I need to go back to the role and the duties of the directors. I wouldn't want to believe that that will be the new normal. I would want to believe, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the various laws, so to say, coming from the federal and the states, and by the way, they are entitled and they are empowered to pass all those laws. And I'll refer you to section 45 of the Constitution, which says, even in all our rights, as to freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom of whatever we have, that in a reasonably justifiable circumstances, these rights can be taken away. Subsection A says, in the interest of defense, public safety, public order, public morality, or public health. Or sub B says, for the purpose of protecting the rights and freedoms of others. So given the circumstance in which we found ourselves, with these various laws saying restricting movement, social distancing, the board is left, I wouldn't say with no alternative. It has an alternative that you may not hold your AGM now, but the board is left in the circumstance to take a decision, and they are entitled to do that. So what they are doing presently is, let us do this hybrid, or let us do this online. Let us do our AGM within the confines of the rules and regulations that have been made available. Yes, the question that has been asked, what gave all these regulatory agencies and authorities the authority to make the guidelines? They are guidelines. We have all agreed that the laws are extant. They have not changed. The appropriate thing would be to amend the laws, to amend the Constitution, just like I think Senator Okoyemi Bamidele has done with regards to virtual hearing in court proceedings. There is a bill presently in the National Assembly to amend the Constitution to actually say there can be virtual hearings, because the Constitution says hearings should be or must be in open court. So that is the right thing that should have been done. Amend the extant laws. But do we have enough time to amend the extant laws? I would say no, not enough time. And so with the guidelines, we can make do with that for now. Yes, countries like Switzerland have amended, Austria have amended their Corporation Act, and so many other countries. We will follow suit. But what do we do for now? Doctrine of necessity applies too. Let's make do with what we have for now. I don't think it's going to be the new normal. I think the companies are amending their memo now to make room for virtual hearing. And you know, we have to move with also technology too. Even all of us, the way we met before, some of us have made up our minds now. I've made up my mind, instead of leaving Banana Island and going to Ikeja or Lekki for meetings and staying in hold up and traffic for 4 hours, I do my meetings online. This is the new normal, but it must be stated that companies must not amend or do things to take away shareholders' rights. It is their right to meet. The right remains. It is only taken away for a period of time. Now, who knows? Next year, by the special grace of God, there will be physical AGMs. But that does not mean they cannot amend their articles and put things in shape and proper perspective. If there is need next year to do virtual meeting, yes, it will be done. If there is need to do the physical meeting, yes, it will be done. But we must all support the board and management now to take appropriate decisions going forward so that there will be business continuity and sustainability.
Okay,
so it's not the new normal.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Alajide. Thank you so much. Flowing from what you have said, my next question is going to be directed to Ms. Awe. And it's also going to, I'll link it with a question that we have from my chairman, Mr. Abiaida, in the Q&A box. And I'll read it out. He says that it does appear that the current situation, which we hope is temporary, presents an opportunity to integrate some elements of the online proxy virtual ecosystem into the future conduct of annual general meetings to increase shareholder access. Should regulators not be planning now for a new legislative framework that proactively encourages and supports electronic interaction and participation? Given the demographics of current active shareholder participation, should we not be pivoting to develop and encourage a new additional cohort of shareholders? So, Ms. Awe, I'm going to throw that to you. From a regulatory perspective, what can be done, and since the regulator will be advocating for companies to ensure that we have legislative framework to cover for virtual meetings or to cover for a situation where we have in such a pandemic in the future?
Okay, I think certainly the answer to Mr. Aida's question is yes. This is a time like no other where it's important that regulators and everybody indeed that is involved in this ecosystem with companies comes together to try and ensure that we actually bring our 1990 law to the level of 2020. Because part of the problem is that our company's law is a 1990 law, and therefore it uses words like place, which in 1990 meant a physical place. Although now you can think of an internet, a virtual place on the internet, and I think ICSAN has done some work on places of virtual meetings, which folks can read. So yes, the answer is yes. I think it was done very quickly in Switzerland, and if you look at the Swiss ordinance that has it dealt with all sorts of issues. So we can go two routes. Either we go, there was a move to amend CAMA. It got up to the president's desk with the last assembly, and then for some reason I think there were some challenges and it wasn't signed. And the stock exchange was involved in that effort, and we know that there were several provisions in that document. At least if it went to the final stage the way it was with the committees that were working on it, that absolutely had provisions for electronic meetings. I think the word used was electronic, now we use virtual, but actually would have taken care, in my view, of many of the issues that we have now. So I think we can revisit that document, or if that is going to take too much time, given that so many people are interested in CAMA, because it's a 1990 law, there are a lot of things that a lot of people would like to change. So it's a kind of law that to change it may take a lot of time, which is why I think all attempts to change it in the past have not been successful. We can do what the Swiss did. which is in our national stimulus bill, which I think is currently before the House of Reps. We add a couple of paragraphs there to deal with these specific issues. If we all work together, the executive and the legislature and corporate Nigeria and shareholders associations and concerned regulators work together, it's something that can be done and can be done very quickly. So absolutely the way to go. And I don't think after COVID-19 there is any going back. COVID-19 has immutably, it has simply changed the world. And we're not, I think all of us have seen the advantages of virtual meetings. People get to meetings on time. Meetings are actually starting on time now because people are in the comfort of their offices or their homes. So it's the same thing that we should adopt with companies' meetings, and I think it's an idea whose time has come.
Thank you so much. It's an idea whose time has come. So I'll throw that to Sir Nwosu. Virtual meeting is an idea whose time has come. Is it an idea whose time has come according to the shareholders? Will shareholders find this acceptable going forward to have this kind of meeting?
Well, thank you very much, moderator. I want you to remember that since 1961 or 60 thereabout, when the stock exchange was established, we have had old schools who kept the stock exchange going before the advent of the young boys coming in. And the young boys themselves never believed in this cover dividend. It is because of the collapse of money market that brought them back to the exchange. So whatever law we are going to consider must also consider those old men. Some of them cannot read and write, and some of them do not have money to buy the equipment which will empower them on visual meeting. But the fact again is very clear. Now, that cannot even come to fore in the meantime because the regulator and the agreement about CAC bars the companies from dealing with special business. And when you want to do this kind of thing, it is purely a special business, which cannot be entertained under this situation. So we hope that by 1 year after, when companies are coming up with special business, to include this in their memo, then we will view it then. But the fact remains that these companies also do virtual with the board meetings and other committee meetings, which is allowed by their members. But let me say one very important thing, because somebody asks about shareholders asking questions through this proxy meeting. I can assure you that shareholders ask questions, they discuss the annual report being presented. The only difference there is that the hundreds of shareholders that attend AGM will not be there. But the few people that they invite are invited to attend this meeting will do all the needful in asking questions, in asking about the future, in bringing the present situation into fore at that meeting for directors to answer questions and give them hope or whatever happens there, which they will now disseminate back to those they are representing. But the most important thing that all of us should also get to know is that there are some companies that the quorum is about 50 shareholders. Some quorum, it was very interesting to let you know that there was a company where we discovered that the quorum is 10 shareholders. And in this case, you are having more than 100 clauses, which then means that is far more above the number of shareholders that can take a decision for that company. So which means whatever decision is taken at that meeting is very binding as a decision of the AGM. At the beginning, I told you that Independent Shareholders Association wrote to Stock Exchange to allow companies to declare interim dividend. Then after, we can just ratify the AGM. They didn't see that as an issue, but that is just a past tense. What we are using now is the CAC recommended formula. And we appealed to shareholders, the lawyers, because you have mentioned a very strong lawyer, STN, who asked a question, which you said. we should not go into that. Oren has actually talked about the section of the Constitution which also take care of emergency situation like this. So allow these shareholders to get the cover dividend, which they will use to keep body and soul together. I used to have a very old shareholder. He will say, I am coming to this AGM, bearing in mind that I've placed water on the fire. As soon as the dividend is declared, I will use it to buy gari to eat. On the same note, we have shareholders who will tell you that give us whatever is due to us. We are old. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. So any delay on companies that declare dividend is not in the interest of the minority shareholders. That is very clear. Let me quickly also say this, that it is very clear, and I'm happy already recognize this and yourself, that however may be the amount of money contributed by shareholders, they are still the seed provider of such company. And they must enjoy the respect of giving them the honor to enjoy the fruit of their labor. Regulators, and in fact, IMF or World Bank, who are now asking that dividends should be plugged back. What happened to the salaries of their workers? What happened to the salaries of their workers? Are they also going to plug back the salary? Whatever is called dividend is our own salary, and nobody should tamper with it because it will totally discourage the capital market. As of today, it is the smallholders that attend AGM. They are the ones that is speaking loudly for people to know that these companies are quoted. And it is to the joy of this company to say, I have 100,000 shareholders and they are happy with me. Moderator, that's my contribution so far. So the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Security and Exchange, and all the regulators to ensure that minority shareholders are well protected in this country. They must not allow us to lose any interest on our investment. That virtual meeting have come to stay for those who may have the capacity to do it. Don't forget, it takes away data, and data is money. And it is just very important that with time, we should quickly return back to the normal meeting so that anybody that chooses to attend meeting will pay his transport to attend the meeting. Social distancing is also there, which will not allow for a small space for the AGM. So my opinion on this is that everything about minority shareholders is captured in the AGM. And we have to continue to do that with the hope that the pandemic will soon end so that we can have opportunity to continue to meet. Mr. Moderator, I want to thank you. I'm going to go back to the board meeting, which I asked for an excuse to join you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Moses will be around to continue with you.
Okay, that's fine. So, passionate response there. So, still on the issue of dividend, my next question will be directed at Mr. Baswa. Now, in order to sustain cash flow and for some other reasons, a lot of companies have adopted the part of suspending the payment of dividend to shareholders and investors. Now, my question is, should companies be doing this at this time? And companies start suspending dividends to shareholders in order to preserve cash? Is this something we should be looking at doing? Mr. Baswa.
Hi, Ayokele, thanks for the question. Although I feel I'm being set up to incur the wrath of any shareholder that is worried about their dividends. Well, first of all, I have to say that I think the majority of the comments that have been made around this are talking about companies that are fine over this period. Some companies have no choice but to suspend the payment of dividends. And the companies in this category, first of all, it's not lawful to pay, Ore Olajide is the expert on this, but it's not lawful to pay dividends to shareholders if you are unable to pay your creditors. So companies like that, to start with, have no business paying dividends. Another group would be companies who by paying dividends will be putting their company at risk of insolvency. Cash is important at a time like this. If you're not going to have the cash, or at least enough cash reserves to be able to afford to pay your regular creditors, then you have no business paying dividends. It's just like, someone who goes out to giving away money to several people, like an individual. When you're owing so many and you're unable to pay them, it just doesn't make sense. So my assumption is the comments that people have made about the fact that, of course, it's a terrible time. Of course, it's a time that people need the money that they have anticipated to get from the dividend. But there are some circumstances where it's in the interest, both in the interest of the management and the shareholders, that dividends are suspended for a period. I mean, not permanently, except if, that signifies bigger issues. Unfortunately, for companies that find themselves in this position, it means that there may be disposal of that company's shares in favor of others that are performing better. But these are unpopular decisions that some companies will have to make. The reality, some companies will come out the other side in a very bad way. And these are the types of decisions that they may have to make by this global crisis.
Thank you so much, Mr. Badwa. That's very insightful. I'll direct my next questions. I see we have a lot of questions in the Q&A box. I'll be taking it as they come while we also undo some of the questions we have here. We have a question from Mr. Joseph Abudu. He's saying that, is the web conceivably a place for the purpose of holding general meetings in the context of section 211, 216, and 218 of the Companies and Allied Matters Act? Mr. Olajide, can you please address
this? As we have said, this is a novel issue. This has not been addressed before. And we have said, as a background, that we have the extant laws that have not been changed. So you want to hold a meeting, the relevant section of CAMA, probably that is 218, says a notice must be issued and it must include the place and the timing. So there is contention now as to venue. I was discussing with someone and he told me online is online. So if you are holding a virtual meeting online, where would you say is the venue? This is subject to legal interpretation. And in as much as I wouldn't want litigation as a result of this, it might be inevitable. Stakeholders and interested persons might actually approach the court for this interpretation. It has happened in UK, and we have a new case by the Court of Appeal, Akin and Marshall. Akin and Marshall has given some interpretations to practice direction 51Z to say, yes, because of this COVID-19 pandemic, it is novel. And so if the court says there is curtailment as to proceedings or as to whatever is going to happen, so be it. Let me also add that law lords like Justice Legat and some House of Lords Privy Council retired law justices They have come up together in UK, and they are drawing up guidelines for the interpretation of commercial contracts and whatever comes out of COVID-19 as litigation. They are going to use the new reasonable man's test to interpret all this. So it's a legal issue that you have different opinions on. IT will have to come in, intellectual property will have to come in. And let me also add that, yes, we are talking about expenses being cut. I will not advocate expenses being cut now. I will say curtailment of expenses. And multinationals and organizations need to be careful about legal expenses. This is not the time to slash or cut significantly legal expenses. This is the time to empower legal advisors and company secretaries to be able to consult top-tier firms for legal advice, for counseling and direction, so that they will be able to guide the board appropriately. So to come back to that question that has been asked, I wouldn't say, yes, it's a venue, or where the venue is located, because it's a novel issue, and we need expert advice and expert opinion, and the court deciding on say to be able to properly place venue when a virtual meeting is being held. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dadide. Beautiful exposition there. Quickly, because we have a lot of questions and we're running really out of time. My next question is going to go to Ms. Awe. So I have noticed the assistance in quote that was rendered by the exchange to companies this year as it relates to related transactions, because according to the CAC guidelines, special businesses are not allowed, and usually that comes under special business. So my question then becomes, is the exception given by the NSC to subsist for only this year, or is it here to stay?
Okay, so the first thing is that the CAC guidelines were actually amended on the 13th of May, and they now allow for special business, so long as in the opinion you are able to satisfy the CAC that the special business is very urgent and necessary. So we'll see, what happens. I do know, because I sit at the exchange, that there are 3 companies that have already, at least 3 that are in my mind right now, that have been able to convince the CAC that the special business that they want to hold is, that they want to consider is very urgent and necessary. So they've met that standard. And if you look at the notices of those companies, they include discussion of getting a federal mandate for a related party transaction. Now, when going back to your question, so I just wanted to put that fact out there. So companies can do special business so long as they meet that CAC standard of very urgent and necessary. Now, when we put out the circular basically states that we will not enforce our related party transaction rules with respect to general mandates according to the terms of those rules, provided that companies go off and seek to get resolutions from their boards at the meeting of their boards, and that they make certain disclosures. And that was in recognition of the fact that the CAC initial guidelines were for ordinary business only. So now that the CAC is allowing special business so long as you meet that standard of very urgent and necessary, and we have seen that that standard of very urgent and necessary has been met by a number of companies for related party transaction discussions, we are looking again at that issue. Now, one of the reasons why we've not yet done anything about it is because there's a possibility that certain companies will not meet that standard. And so we want them to have the fallback of this non-enforcement, the safe harbor of the non-enforcement of our rule. As things develop, and I said it before, it's a very fluid situation. We may go back and look to see whether we want to do other things around the related party transaction rules. But at the present time, we have no present intention of extending that waiver beyond the time that lack of enforcement, that safe harbor, beyond the time that we think it is necessary. And we're looking at it specifically now because the CAC has moved since the 13th of May from its initial position of only ordinary business.
Thank you very much for that. I'll just quickly get into the Q&A box and take a few questions. We have a question by Mr. Dahiru Usman. He's asking that, please, I need clarification. Some company secretaries are now in the habit of selecting 3 audit committee members to avoid having audit committee elections. What are the regulators doing about this very dangerous trend? Since he has referred to the regulators, I'll just have his awaiting that.
Okay, so there is, in the capital market, there's a complaints management framework that the SEC has put out. And so the first thing is that if people suspect that company secretaries are involved in this habit, which they believe disenfranchises shareholders and helps to put, I guess, friendly bodies in the shareholder portion of the audit committee, they need to make complaints, and they can make complaints to the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And the address is lrd@nsc.com.ng. So we hope that people will make those complaints so that we can investigate in accordance with the structure of the SEC complaints management framework. I think the practice is insidious. Obviously, if that is the case, it does bear looking at and ensuring that a scapegoat is made so that people don't do that. We really should allow the shareholders to participate in the manner pretended by Kama. Thank you.
Thank you very much, man. Thank you so much. I'll throw this next quick one to Ms. Obazua. So we have a question by Titilayo Ainoscott. She's asking and saying that what other lessons apart from virtual meetings can we take from this situation, which can be incorporated into any proposed legislation?
Well, there's the three, for me, it's really so much about the 3 things. And I don't know if Ms. Aino is a communicator or, you know, what she's trying to get from my answer to this question. But for everyone, I think it's an important time to show, maybe not just show, but be relevant to the company or organization or wherever you work. Things are changing rapidly. A lot of unplanned things are happening, and everyone needs to be flexible about their role in a company. Like, for instance, I lead communications for GE across Africa, but I'm not limiting my role during this period to communication, because all leaders are required to put their heads together and work out what's going to be best for the company, what's going to be best for our customers, and what's going to be best for our stakeholders. So I think one lesson people need to learn is don't go into this, for whatever you do, whatever role you play, don't go into it expecting it to be the same as the day before. Things are changing rapidly, and I can't repeat it enough times. This isn't the new normal. This is still transition. So even if we've adapted and we are able to provide value during this time, the requirements for future dates may be totally different. So keep close to the business. To me, that's more important than adopting technology, to be honest. Just to keep very close to your business, understand where things are heading, understand what the influences are at that particular point in time, and then provide value that helps meet those needs. But very importantly, companies and people need to envision recovery. Someday, the pandemic will be over, and you would be looked at for what you did during this period of time. Companies need to stay true to their purpose and values. like the company I work for instance, our purpose is that we rise to the challenge of helping to build a world that works. So when there's a pandemic and we are in power and we are in healthcare and aviation, we have to rise to the challenge of making sure that the electricity systems still work, that the healthcare systems work, that you can support hospitals to attend to patients. So companies need to stay true to their purpose and values. Ultimately, think about what you want your company and your actions to be perceived as when this is over, and act accordingly. So that once this crisis has passed, we can emerge even stronger.
Thank you so much. Beautiful. I think I've learned a few things from what you have said, and I think it's very important that we're taking good enough. We have regulators and decision makers listening to this. Hopefully, in the legislation that is being proposed to be developed, hopefully we'll have anticipated some of the situations that we've previously not anticipated will be considered, and then it can be included in this legislation. My next question then goes to Mr. Olajide. I have a question from Mr. Anthony Digbe. He's asking what is the sense in limiting virtual proxy meetings to ordinary businesses when it is in this very emergency situation that companies may need to conduct special business to authorize things like emergency fundraising, etc. Why has the CAC limited businesses to be transacted at this year's AGM to ordinary businesses when there is a reason for social businesses to be transacted in view of the pandemic? Mr. Olajide.
Thank you, Ayo. Thank you, Ayo. Well, these are powerful questions coming from senior advocates of Nigeria. Knowledge, wisdom too. And as I've said, this is a period to collaborate. But having said that, I want to believe that the CAC have amended the guidelines that was initially put out. And I believe they have allowed special businesses to be conducted with approval or with permission. Again, I wouldn't want us to go into the validity or the legality of the guidelines. We have said it's a guideline. And so I believe that there has been an amendment. I participated in a webinar. I think Ms. Awe was there, organized by Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators. And the issue was raised. I think Mr. Braimov from CAC also participated in that webinar. And given the importance of special businesses, as the learned senior advocate of Nigeria have raised, we were told to write a letter, and that CAC will look into it because they are ready to collaborate and to assist as a regulatory agency. So I want to believe special businesses are allowed, are permitted with approval of the CAC, and the resolutions are to be passed as ordinary resolutions. And while we were discussing, I mentioned to you that I've taken time recently to look at the adverts in the papers for the AGMs. And specifically, I'll be referring to the three that I've referred to before. That's the one for JB, Julius Budget, the one for Stanbic, and the one for Nestle. And they have special businesses contained therein. And it states with the approval of CAC. You know, so I believe special businesses are permitted with the approval of CAC. Thank you. But there remains guidelines. The laws are there, but these are guidelines. And it's good. And we must commend the regulatory agencies for collaborating very well with all stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Olajide. I have two questions. I'm just going to link two questions because they are similar, and I'm going to direct it to Ms. Awe. The first question is by Mr. Dele Ayupo, who's my brother. He's saying that given the necessity of social distancing, how do we ensure that management does not abuse this privilege and are held accountable in an AGM? Additionally, I'm also going to take the comment and the question by Mr. Mustafa Jinadu, saying that before the COVID-19 pandemic, there were some companies that already had plans to lay off their workers. And now with the pandemic, the companies are using this as an advantage to lay off workers. What are regulatory authorities doing to avert this? Basically, the question is, what are regulatory bodies doing to avert an abuse of, to avert a situation where companies are using the pandemic for other purposes?
Okay, so I think if I take the last one, the one about laying off workers,
Yes. Okay.
I think really, and a lot of people on this call are directors. Companies will do what they feel is in the best interest of the company, and sometimes what in their assessment is in the best interest of the company is that they cannot continue with that number of staff that they had before the COVID-19, or sometimes it was already a problem which is now exacerbated by COVID-19. And I think their fiduciary duties are to the company, to do what is right and to take everything into account in making that decision. It's not just like the business judgment rule. It's not something that a regulator is well suited to do, to come into your company and start saying, oh, I think maybe you shouldn't have laid off people. It's like a slippery slope. And so a company can turn around and say, regulator, you told me not to lay off people, but see the effects. My company is now going bankrupt because I had that so many employees that I really couldn't afford. So I think every company really has to bite the bullet and not be afraid. Directors, this is a time for boldness, and this is a time to make decisions that they believe are in the best interest. I think it's also a time to be humane and kind, however. And so the way that you go about doing it, I think, this is a time when we can all see our shared humanity. All of us are on lockdown in Nigeria, whether we have the means to go out or not. All of us are subject to the same social distancing. So it's a time to also, I think, be humane, but it's not a time when I think regulators can say, do this or do that. Having said that, the CBN, as you know, did come out to say that if banks are going to lay off staff, they need its approval. That's a smaller group. There are only so many banks in Nigeria, and maybe the CBN has more of a pulse on how that will happen. But as a general rule, I don't think a regulator that has loads of companies to regulate can make that type of judgment for them. One will just have to hope that directors are well trained, that directors are doing what is in the best interest of the company. With respect to management abusing, directors and management, I guess, abusing the opportunities that are presented by proxy meetings and some of the hybrid engagements that we have going on. That possibility is certainly there. If you notice in the CAC guidelines, companies have to get the approval of the CAC to the agenda, and so I think that was one of the reasons that I initially informed the CAC going only on ordinary business. Ordinary business is simple. You look at section 214 of CAMA and you see it. So the room for abuse is not as much. As you go into special business and some of the things, then my understanding of what has happened is the CAC is saying special business that requires an ordinary resolution. I think special business that requires a special resolution may be a place where, you may want to look at it properly as to, is this the kind of power you want to give in this instance? But balancing it against, as Leonard and Mr. Idigbe has said in his question, these are times when companies need all the powers that they need to act, and they may need some of the powers that they can only get under a special resolution to act. So it's a balancing act. It's an act where you have to be talking, you have to be communicating. I think Patricia said it well. You have to be transparent. And I even though I'm not a communications expert, what I will say is that even if you don't know the full picture, let your shareholders know that this is what we're saying at this time. As things develop, we will come out and say more. You know, work with your communications people to do that. That way, people are not concerned that you are abusing the powers that you are giving, or you are taking advantage of the pandemic to do the wrong thing.
Thank you so much. I think you've captured it all. I'm going to we'll be able to take just about 2 more questions before we round everything off. And my penultimate question is going to go to Mr. Bazua. So we have a question from Mr. Thomas Awago. He's asking the question that, don't you think the best option would be a combo of physical and virtual general meetings? This will allow attendance by all across the world who are interested, who have consistently missed the opportunity because of their different locations. Ms. Bazua.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, it's a point. No, it's a point and a question in the same sentence. And if we're going to be realistic, and I know a lot of people would prefer for things to go back to exactly where they were before. If we're going to be realistic, we know for a fact that technology is going to play a much bigger role. If people are able to come together and it helps them engage more people because we're using virtual meetings, then virtual meetings are going to be here to stay. And at the very minimum, physical meetings are going to be augmented by virtual meetings. If one company starts doing it, others will start to do it. I sit on a board of a US nonprofit organization. So virtual board meetings have always been our standard way of operating. We would aim to have physical meetings once a year, but every quarter we have to have virtual meetings. It's always been efficient. I'm sure a lot of the companies that have had these in the past, for the past quarter, would testify that it actually did work, surprisingly for some. I mean, if the technology is fine, companies will have to invest in it. And I totally agree with you. Going forward, somehow, every company is going to have to include virtual meetings as part of their normal way of operating.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I have a writer to that, and this question is also going to go across to the other panelists also. What can companies actually do to instill confidence in shareholders to go along with the new order? How can companies get shareholders to buy into the new digital order in terms of holding meetings in such a way that shareholders can have the confidence that their interests will be preserved, even if digital, hybrid, or virtual AGMs are adopted?
Well, first of all, it's basic, same way that you build trust. To start with, there was a very important point that Tinu made earlier about the fact that meetings are starting on time, unlike before when people come in late for physical meetings. Making sure that the experience is seamless for the shareholder, I think, is the first step to gaining confidence. But also, how do shareholders have access to these virtual meetings? Making sure that whatever technology you're using, whatever platform, is easy for people to use and connect to, and being very flexible. If having, and I don't advocate this, but if having a WhatsApp group for a small group of investors works, then use it. If sending bulk text messages works for a period of time, use it. Although the interaction, the engagement is important, so I don't advocate, again, one-way conversations. But it's to what extent a company goes to make the process seamless for shareholder and to make the content of the actual interactions productive for the shareholder is what will get those shareholders to look favorably at the concept of virtual meetings. But remember, like the person who asked the earlier question said, It also means that more shareholders can join. People who are not able to be there physically can join virtually. I don't know, even those of us on this panel, I don't know how many people have attended AGMs of every company whose shares they hold. If these were virtual, this makes it all more possible. So at the end of the day, it's about building trust. When you have the trust, it's about making the experience productive and seamless and easy to participate in, which in turn builds more trust.
Thank you so much. So companies should look to making it seamless, productive, and then building the trust of shareholders. That's according to Ms. Obosua. Ms. Awe, I would like to have your thoughts on this.
Okay, so I agree with everything that Patricia has said. I think the only thing that I would like to add is that the content of that communication, I think companies can really use the content of that communication to drive shareholder engagement and drive shareholder just the trust that they need. So what are you communicating? Are you communicating about your business continuity plans in this, not in any detailed fashion, but first of all, that you actually have at the highest levels of governance in the company? Maybe you have an ad hoc board committee that is your crisis committee that is dealing with these issues. Communicate it to your shareholders. If you are the kind of business that you know is affected, like you run hotels or you provide the stuff that is taken in hotels or bars or you do things that are very affected by the lockdown, communicate that you're looking into these things. Communicate that you have a risk management framework and that you're assessing that risk management. Communicate that you're doing things that will ensure that this kind of issues, that for fire, for natural disasters, you're not only looking at a pandemic like this, but that it has caused you to look more widely at what you're doing. Communicate, if you don't have a tech person on your board, that you're looking to bring a tech person onto your board. Communicate that you're looking to get the appropriate skills to be able to deal with these kinds of things. I think Patricia keeps saying it. We're talking about the new normal, but it's not the new normal. It's really the new fluid until we get to wherever we're going. On maybe a vaccine, and a vaccine they say can be 18 months time, it could be 24 months time. So the content of that communication, not just communicating, we're looking at it. What are you doing? That's the way you build the transparency. That's the way you build the fact that shareholders think, yes, these guys are faced with something that we've all never seen before, but at least they're doing their best in the circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hear communication. Communication and engaging with shareholders and transparency. I hear all of that, and I think it's very important. We'll have Mr. Olajide on his thoughts on this.
Okay, thank you once again, Ayo. I agree with the other panelists. Communication is key, so you cannot overemphasize it. I'll need to take us back to the extant law again, because we are talking about organizational statutory obligations. Section 280, subsection 4, the inability or unwillingness of the company to perform any functions or duties under its articles and memorandum shall not constitute a defense to any breach of duty of a director under the Act. It's all about the directors and management in the organization. They need to put up their thinking caps. They need to change their costume into a military costume and use the bulletproof vest, because shots will be fired. Shortly before end of COVID-19 and thereafter COVID-19. Not a fake bulletproof vest that will one on risk management. To give confidence to investors, you need to demonstrate that you are preserving value of the organization. That gives strength and confidence to investors. You need to demonstrate responsible business principles. Your business continuity plan must be reviewed at all times. You must have the right skill set and the right mindset. Right skill set and the right mindset to be able to move the business forward. That's when investors will have confidence in the organization. You need systems leadership on behalf of management. And that's what Patricia talked about. That she's not only functioning in her role. I'm not only functioning in my role as company secretary, legal advisor. I participate in HR, I participate in IT, I participate in governance, I participate in compliance, and I participate in regulatory affairs. You know, all hands must be on deck, and that's system leadership. What else do the boards and the organizations need to do to give investors confidence? They must collaborate with stakeholders. So far, so good. CAC, SEC, NSC, good collaboration. Now, they also need to deploy good soft skills. There has been enough demonstration of hard skills. I think everyone, to an extent, you are where you are because you had one degree or the other. Now, this studied and learned in the universities and the business schools may fail us. So this is the time to demonstrate wisdom and tact. On risk management, you have strategies and scenario planning. Strategies and scenario planning this time might fail. What will not fail is wisdom and experience and tact. The board must supervise management very well. I learned about, we are discussing about employees or no employees. Management, in wanting to cut costs, might want to go that route. The board must supervise very well to make sure that it knows what management is doing. And so nothing must get to the public or nothing must get done, so to say, without the board approval. The board must meet regularly now, more than before, not the regular quarterly meeting. The last one that probably I would like to say is the advice and the opinions of experts must be sought. CAMA provides, and all the rules and regulations and the Financial Reporting Council, the guidelines on corporate governance, provide that the board and the management, they are entitled to obtain legal opinion on areas before they decide thereon. And for the senior advocates and many legal practitioners that are on this webinar, most are sitting on many boards that I know about. So their wealth of experience should be brought in here, and we should put heads together. And before I end, let me recommend that the ABA section of business law has a lot of roles to play here in coming out and supporting the business environment to make sure that we are on the right path and investors' confidence remains the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olajide. Thank you so much for those comments. I have learned the importance of developing soft skills. It's important to collaborate with stakeholders, and all hands must be on deck at this point to also ensure that business continuity is on point. At this point, I would like to stop taking questions at this point, and I also like to apologize on behalf of the IOD to everybody whose questions or comments may not have been taken. We've actually exceeded the time we allocated for the webinar. So apologies again. We're so sorry for that. At this point, I'm going to call on the Director General of the IOD to give closing remarks and vote of thanks. Mr. Dele Alimita.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ayoko. I want to, on behalf of the Institute, thank all members of the panelists, all members of the panel. Starting with the ladies, I want to start Mrs. Patricia Obazua. Thank you very much for your time. Mrs. Tinuade Awe, we really appreciate your coming. And Mr. Orelajide, we say a very big thank you. Mr. Sunday Sasoni Wosu, we say very thank you to you. And of course, to our wonderful moderator, you have made this program quite interesting for everyone. I want to, on behalf of the Institute, say a very big thank you to you. It's been, I didn't even know we had gone this far, that 2 hours had flown so fast. It's really quite, it was a very enlightening program. Even I have learned so much, and I dare say the participants have also learned so much. And I'm also grateful to all the participants, the very lively questions we've received, and for your patience to be with us for 2 hours. We say a very big thank you. Like I always say at the end of our webinar, this is one of the many we're going to do. Like we all know, this has opened our eyes to new opportunities. And I tell people, even when coronavirus is not with us, we have learned new ways to get ourselves together and to do things at our convenience. And I think this is wonderful. Gone are the days when you have to send in an apology when you are invited to come and speak anywhere. Now you know you can be available to speak anywhere at any time once you are free. I say a very big thank you again. And to the participants and also the panelists, for those who are not members of the Institute, this is what we do. And our role is to ensure capacity development of directors. And we will continue to do that as much as we can, especially during this kind of times we find ourselves. We say a very big thank you to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you again at the next webinar. It's a series, and we continue to look at relevant issues as they come up, challenging issues as they come up during this time. Thank you very much, everybody, and I wish you a very nice day, and please continue to keep very safe. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, DG. We appreciate you. And I think at this point, we can say we are officially closed. And this is the end of the webinar. Thank you so much to my distinguished panelists who have found time to be part of the webinar. Thank you so much, Ms. Awe. We appreciate your participation. Ms. Obozowa, thank you so much for being here. My boy, Mr. Alajide, thank you so much for participating. Thank you so much. And our appreciation, if Moses is online, we extend our appreciation also to Sasson Wosu. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. Have a lovely evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Ayo. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ms. Ara. Thank you, Patricia. Bye-bye. Thank you.
I